on. So today for the book club, we will be discussing Let's Talk About Love. Sorry, I've read so many books lately. I kind of almost said the wrong name. Um, by Claire Kahn, and this is a wonderful story about a asexual woman's search for love, or just her experience with love, I guess is a better way to put it. And I just really wanted to read this book because it's so rare that we get, stories about, asexual people, and then definitely like a black asexual person on top of that. So this story I knew was going to be special, and I'm glad it did not disappoint. And it was just really heartwarming, and it's nice, quick, lighthearted read, you know, um, to, kind of put some jovialness in there.
Yeah, I honestly, the most impactful part, especially as someone who grew up as a black woman and was also pretty sure I was asexual, and I'm actually coming back to that now. It was so nice to have a happy ending. Like that was the night that was so wonderful. It just like the epilogue, a happy ending, and then the book ended. No trauma, no nothing. I was like, y'all might have done really well on this one. Y'all ate with all of it, not just the one. Y'all ate with all of
Yeah, it's just like kind of like a asexual rom-com, which is like so good to
it.
have. Like, cause yeah, I think that a lot of times, I mean, like I said, we don't get representation like this, so
Exactly.
it just fits so good in the spirit that I think it should.
hmm And oh, what was I gonna say? Oh, touching on your point, I think like especially it being a black asexual too, because it was like
Yeah,
we never get to get too many intersections of marginalization, right? Like they usually only
right.
make like you're only gonna be black or you're only gonna be gay, and it's like they exist together. So
And then not to mention that they were like being super weird about asexual people online while
oh my
this
god.
like while I was
Yes.
reading this, and I was like, wow, that is so crazy that I was reading this, and they were being cash crazy to asexual people online at the same time. Like it just lined up. Like
Literally, the ace phobia is so wild because it's like I'm like, y'all get on these websites and tell people to be prudes and to save sex and not have sex at all. And then somebody's like, okay, well, I'm not sexually attracted to anyone. They're like, well, no, that's not correct either. Is it what you all there, what, Mike? That's my question. Because I had the same conversation with my mom when I was a kid, because she's super Christian. She was like, yeah, no sex till marriage, blah. And I told her one day, I was like, I think I'm asexual. She's like, what does that mean? I was like, I just don't want to have sex with anybody. She was like, no, I'm sure you'll find the right person. It'll be fine, blah. Now, how am I supposed to find the right person if I can't do any of that till after I'm married? So it was an experience. I think there were some parts of it where it was just like, I really resonate with that. Like feeling like I couldn't, I guess, disclose for so long because it was like, okay, do people even want to date people that don't really want to have sex like that? And it feels like it's such a taboo conversation that shouldn't be taboo for you and the person you're dating. Like that should be a conversation y'all should be able to have. You know what I mean?
yeah, and I like that the book kind of opens up with that, like presenting that to the reader. It's like, okay, the character is asexual. Asexual people can have sex. Asexual people, um, you know, can be in relationships. Asexual people, but it also by like starting with like the breakup scene, it like kind of emphasized that that doesn't mean there isn't a struggle, and and it's I think really well structured from that perspective for the conversation around asexuality in general. And I really enjoyed getting this deeper sort of uh just sort of like deeper dive into like what asexuality, what it's like to move around in an asexual body, because like um especially like a lesbian, romantic, asexual person.
Mm.
Um, it's just like there's just so many intersections there, and there's so many important
Yes.
conversations that nobody has. And then instead of
Mhm.
people just assume things instead of actually having the conversations. And I think that books like this could be really helpful for especially like asexual like people that are like coming to terms with being asexual and then like saying okay so because I think for a lot of times without information people get into like this headspace where they're like I think I'm this but I did this or I think I'm this but this happened to me so what does that mean like does that mean that I can't be these things like I was like okay you know uh I am attracted to men but I'm also attracted to women like what does that mean right and you get that a
Yes.
lot with the same thing with like bisexuality and like asexual and aromantic people it kind of
Mhm.
crosses they have like that same sort of like invalidation at the intersection where
Exactly.
like people are like you have to be this or that and
Mhm.
there's
They're
no in
like, oh,
between.
but you have this past
There's no
history.
in
Like, how
between.
can you do this?
There's no outliers. There's just you just are. And
Hmm.
if you aren't, then that means that something is wrong with you, and we need to fix that.
Exactly. Like and especially when we get into the Asagi stories too, like it was it's such a binary. It's just another binary presented where it's like
Right.
you're either normal or you're asexual. And that's such a big binary that gets presented all the time. And especially like how, like you're talking about how it started with the breakup. I know a lot of ace folks and ace arrow folks too um end up having that conversation with themselves even before they get to a breakup point, and having that specific experience is so invalidating because it's like, how are you going to sit here and tell me that I don't love you enough when all I'm telling you is that I'm not a big fan of sex or that I don't want to have sex? Like those are two
I
different
just don't have a
conversations.
desire to have sex. I don't.
Like
Not,
those are
and
two
then
different
also
conversations.
it also like it doesn't have to be no desire to have sex. It's like asexuality is also like kind of a spectrum,
Like
like where
what
you have like where people
exactly? And they
are
talk about that in the book too. I was so thankful for like talking about gray aces, talking about that differential between romantic attraction, aesthetic attraction, and sexual attraction. Like they covered so much.
yeah, it's like there are asexual people who might just once every once in a blue moon, but if maybe even more rare than that, they might be like, oh, like I have a sexual desire today, but I mean, it's doesn't mean, and I think that there's this huge thing in our culture about fixing people, like you can't accept people how they are when they go into a relationship with them. You have to like say like if there's something about your partner that you don't like, there's always this thing where like there's like this emphasis that you have to like try to fix them. And I think that that comes from that sets of relationships with a really toxic and resentful environment where people are well both parties are just trying to like take the best parts of someone and leave the parts that they don't like where you kind of have to you know take somebody at their whole value as they change. Like that's kind of what relationships are supposed to be about. And I think that especially since, it was like the book doesn't like she knows she's asexual from the beginning of the book, which I think is
Mhm.
really I think is really important that like we start out like, no, this is not about finding asexuality. This is about being someone who
It's
is
about,
asexual.
yes, like existing
And,
in it and growing it, like
right.
loving it. Yeah. Yeah. And what was I about to say? I just lost my train of thought. No, I lost my train of thought. I'll have to figure it
Like the
out later.
spectrum of asexuality.
Ooh, yes, because I think I realized I was on the gray ace spectrum area because that, like what you were just talking about, that's what I experienced when I was with my ex-fiance. I was like, okay, like I'm in the mood every quarter or so. And we sat down and we talked about it. And it was like, it wasn't a hard conversation, but it was like we are on a bit of different pages when it comes to this. And also, it was not something that she needed as consistently. So it ended up working out for us because we finally ended up having that conversation. We could
Mhm.
have fallen into turmoil for sure. And I think, like the narrator had with Takumi, um, It's economy, sorry, that once you're affirmed in that and you're just not, I don't want to say allowed to exist, but once you just have that acceptance, it's such a different pace than what everybody else seems to tell you. And sometimes it feels like almost shocking. It's like, wow, finally got someone who like supports and believes.
And I think that it also is like there is like this thing where it's really hard to have these conversations. And I think that it is, when we're talking about like asexuality or bisexuality or when we're talking about just like sexuality in general, libido, I think that, a lot of people feel like they have to be one thing and they can't exist outside of that. So they like a lot of men and women are really, and non-binary people are really scared to admit that they really don't want sex as much as society tells us that people are
Mhm.
supposed to want sex. And whether it be a woman who wants sex more than society tells women they're supposed to want sex, or a woman that wants sex less than society tells people that they're supposed to want sex. And then you have this conversation where women aren't even supposed to want sex, so that it corrupts,
Exactly.
especially when I think
Mhm.
especially when it's women in the conversation, it really corrupts because women are so sexualized, but also expected to be so pure and not actually want
Mhm.
sex. And sex is not really like something that is supposed to be a want for women. It's supposed to be something that is taken from
It's
them,
like a duty. Yes.
or like something that is or that they give to their partner. And
Mhm.
so what I think, like you have like third wave feminism and all this stuff comes out, and then people are trying to release um the the sexual bindings that women are under, right? And I think that because people are trying to gain that freedom for women, it can also sometimes hinder conversations around asexuality, and people that, asexual people may feel like it's not their, it's not their turn to speak, or like they're not, that there's something wrong with them, or something that they're supposed to be experiencing this sexual freedom, but they don't really want it. Like they don't want to be sexual. They don't.
Yes, like they have the freedom to not be sexual. And I feel like
Right.
we forget the freedom goes the other way too. That's the whole freedom part. You're free to do what you want.
Yeah. And I think that I think that that's why it's so important that, I think that's why this book particularly is so important. Not even to mention that it just unequivocally a really fun, really good book. I really enjoyed it. I think that the conversation is a good added bonus onto it, but just um I just really had a good time with the book in general. I think that, it's a rom-com kind of, so like it has like those rom-com vibes that you would expect a rom-com to have, but it has like, the romance story beats and all that stuff, but it's fun. It has great vibes. There's a good flow to the story. Like I just really enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah, I really, really did enjoy it. And it honestly, it kind of had me linking into when Takumi came back and he was like, I know that I had like a pretty different reaction than you were expecting. And I went and researched everything. I just have some more questions. Um, honestly, that felt like a really significant point for me because as I saw that as like from the lens of someone who's still exploring the gray A spectrum for myself, but also as someone who's non-binary, it
Mhm.
was like, a lot of people, I think sometimes I forget that a lot of people just don't even know that non-binary people exist, don't know what non-binary people are at all. And so like I feel like part of that affirmation in this book for me was that he had even taken the time to go and research and do, look it up on his own and come back with clarifying questions rather than just being like, what is this, blah, 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 and like not wanting to do any research on his own. Um, I felt like that was really, even in that part, even though that part of the book was a bit of like a conflict moment still, it was still really nice to see that he like made an effort to try and understand on its own. And I know
Right.
we have that conversation in so many different marginalized communities where it's like, if you're going to come with a question, at least do your research beforehand and have a question you need explanation in detail on, rather than just the general, like, what is this? Blah, blah, blah. Like, he
Right.
really did his research. So, yeah, I really, really did enjoy it. It was a nice, fun book.
Yeah, I think that it's good that like I said, I think this book is a really important book, and I think that it's good that a group of people would have books where we can just have a good time and not have to worry about trauma and traumatized,
Mm-hmm.
but
Because we
also
learned from
still
plenty.
have those really important conversations and provide really good representation for people and just tell good stories, but also be representative and 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 I can't emphasize enough how I think, the cover, at least the one that I have, has, a black woman on it. And, I think that that's really important. And, Claire Kahn being a black woman writing this is really important. And the story I checked this book from my library, and the fact that it is in my library, I think is important. I just think that, you know, the the accessibility that was provided to this book, the because I mean I found it to be pretty accessible, at least in this country. I know that you know it may not be as accessible in other countries maybe, but I think that I just found it really beautiful, um, and I think especially the conversation that's surrounding sexual people about it existing or it not existing, having definitive something like a book like this where you can hold and say like, yes, this is asexuality, this is something that is a representation of asexuality and it exists and it's tangible, it makes it tangible in a way that I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like, no notes, no notes at all. You're exactly right.
I don't know. I just I find it to be so like it just filled my heart with such good emotions as I was reading it.
Yeah.
Like I was just like, this is so fun. Like I was just having such a good time like reading it. And I think that um, you know, books like that's not always the goal of a book, but I think that having books that have that achieve that, it just is so
Mhm.
refreshing. Um, and let me see. Let me just get the book out.
Yeah. It was nice. It sure was nice because I had that same cover too. I saw it. I saw it, and then when I read the I guess the book description about asexuality, I was like, oh yes, yes, that's the same cover they have over here. I was like, no way. And then in the middle, like I felt like every couple of pages I was reading, I was just like, no way, this is about a black ace person. Mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm. That was good. That was good. I'm really glad. I will say I was hanging on to every bit of that conflict that her and Feeny had. Oh, I didn't think they were gonna make it. I was so nervous for them.
Yeah, it I mean
Mm,
it's like I said, this is really good story beats to it. It's really well paced and crafted. And it was like a pretty easy read. I mean, it's a pretty short book, I think. It's under 300 pages, which is pretty light, I think. Um the characters were really well thought out. The the I I like that, it's like she's the character Alice as a character is really open and it kind of wears her heart on her sleeve and
mm,
it's I just found her to be like really endearing. Um the I just like the way that she moved through out the story. I thought it was funny. It was really it was just really it was really good. It filled me with really good emotions. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, I will say it definitely had me in my emotional bag. I was on the edge a couple times right with her. Bless her heart. but it was good. I really enjoyed it, and I don't think I can say enough how much I appreciated that it just had a nice ending. Like you're talking about, there wasn't any trauma or anything that we had to look out for. It was just a nice cut and dry rom-com happy ending. I was like, thank you. Love that for myself. Especially with like, I'll say I think it was nice that it had such a happy ending because of all of the like unhappy endings happening in real life right now. It was like, okay, this is really nice to just like have a moment to pause and be like, yes, we did it.
And I also think that like I could have I would have liked it to even be longer. Like I would have loved to have read more of this. I would have loved that if it would have been more,
Mhm.
I would have loved um I would love it if she wrote more of this. Like
Yeah.
it's just super it was just super cool, like to um like to have the story be there and how it's set up and um I think it just really spoke to me. And I'll definitely, you know, definitely will end up being one of my most memorable books of the year. If it's not even if it doesn't end up being one of my favorite books of the year. So
Yeah. Now, hopefully, I'm gonna try and actually get a physical copy because I want to keep this one. It was a nice read. It's a
yeah,
book I was
I'm definitely
coming
gonna have
back to.
to order a copy off Amazon or something
Mm-hmm.
because I'm gonna have to like I want to have this to be like and I'm definitely gonna like recommend it to people and be like
Yeah.
people, you know, I think would enjoy it. I'm like, oh, people have questions about asexuality. I'm like, hey, you should just read this is really good. This really cute book about it. Like you would love it. Like 'cause it's just it I think it's just refreshing and fun and it broaches it talks about asexuality in such an open and honest way that I think
Mm-hmm.
it would really speak to people. So
Yeah. And it just lays so many, I guess I don't necessarily want to say concerns, but it lays so many issues out too. Like it's accessible and it tackles a lot of the things that ace folks talk about when it comes to dating, when it comes to relationships in general. Yeah.
when it comes to representation, like
Mm-hmm. Oh, what a good book.
yeah, I
I'm
just
so glad
really
I got to make it today because I was when I started reading this, I was like, this is one I gotta make for sure.
yeah, I hope more people read this because I think it is just really important and I think it's such a it was such a milestone reading it for me that I just hope more a lot of people, as many people as possible, give it a chance and that they go out and look for it and pick it up. Um, but if you want, we can go ahead and flow into I don't want to say it wrong. A Segi
I,
story.
yeah, I've been saying Asegi stories.
Yeah,
Also crossing fingers over here. That's right for sure. But yeah, I will say this book, I didn't get through all of it. I got about not even halfway through. Did I get more than halfway through? I got about halfway through. Just because it was so much to hold. Not in necessarily a bad way,
yeah.
but it was
Similar to Black on Both Sides, it was just a really
Mhm.
important text, and
Exactly.
it definitely it's just so much important theory and so much important
Yeah.
history and so much like so much lost history that's not like ever like taught in you know ever in any
Mhm.
shape or stretch of the
Right.
imagination
Yeah,
and
and
it's really I found it really helpful to get this sort of like background on like Two Spirit you know, because that's something that I think recently has really in the last like 5 years, it's like really 5 or 10 years is like really resurged as a term that a lot of non-binary people feels like represents them, and I think that that's wonderful. So to get like a good resource on that, and to have you know all this good research to like delve into,
yes, have
I
all
was really
these
excited
references in
about
the
it.
book to go back to. Yes. Yeah.
And I think similar to Black on Both Sides, it's really like one of those books where you can like go back to all the time and reference all the time, and you know
Exactly.
it's almost also comforting in a way, like this is a lot of this tackles like really heavy subjects. It's like the it's uh you feel like you've like accomplished so much by reading it, and it like really
Mhm.
fills you with can you hear me? I think my
Yeah, it gives you a good structure. Oh, for sure. Um, I will say one of the things I think that took me by surprise with this book, well, maybe not necessarily by surprise, but it is so fascinating. And I mean that in the most negative way possible. It is so fascinating that people will read like European accounts of slavery and of like how people how they literally conquered indigenous folks. Oh, did I are you muted? Are you talking to me or oh gosh, my bad, my bad.
no, what were you saying? Go ahead, keep going.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. I was just saying that it's always so surprising to me that like people will believe the European retelling of how this nation was colonized and like how slavery was started. Because it was, the Asegi stories is showing that third space, right? In between what's said and what's unsaid is where that space is. And at the same time, and it's probably just because I am a black person, I see a lot of behind the lines that a lot of people don't see. But it's like reading some of the like the journal entries or like the entries that the Europeans had written or that the Spanish had written um about how they encountered all these different tribes and all these different like groups and communities. It's like reading it, just reading it, not even reading the interpretation afterwards, just reading it. I can tell that that is not what happened. Like reading a passage where they're like, yeah, they brought us gifts because they really want us to rule them and conquer them. Why would you think that? Why would you read that and be like, that is exactly correct? They did want to be conquered, and that's why they gave them gifts and perfume and stuff. Like, why how did you get there? And so it was so important to read this because I think it made me realize that as a population, we're not even at that point where people can read these kind of entries and be like, well, that's not really correct on how that happened. Um, so I think it kind of opened my eyes, I guess, to I guess I thought maybe we were in a different spot or we all had a more a more nuanced collective understanding of how things happen in this country when it started. Uh, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that it was like really it dispelled a lot of mistruths. I think, like you said, about uh, like about Native peoples and Indigenous peoples, and I think that like one of the really important things, it sets a really good foundation to further explore like all of the things that are like talked about in this book about like the way that we were taught about their cultures, and what we do know about their cultures, like how you said with the how when they came here. Like I remember growing up, my one of my social teachers told me like when they like came here, like when the white people came here, that like the indigenous people were like they thought of them as like gods or something, and I was like, I don't know about all
Wow.
that. Like
You
I
got
don't.
that
But
too? They told
they
us that in school too.
they like played down like they like constantly played down like the intelligence of indigenous people, and like like they made them sound so like so primitive and like so naive, and uh
Literally.
but also like savages, like so it's and I think it's something that like comes through like every like American history book you would find that like talks about how naive they were, or like how weak they are, or
Exactly. Like
how
you're savage enough that you need to be conquered and colonized. but you're weak enough that you're able to be colonized. And it's like y'all are holding two different positions, weaponizing them whenever you want to, and
Right.
no one's saying anything. Like that's just it for y'all.
Sounds familiar, right? Like,
Mhm.
and it's so
Yeah.
it's
Oof.
it just there's so many important uh tidbits of this that um that
Mhm.
like you think about and be like, wow, like you just sit back, like you look read something and be like, it would just send me like on like a ADHD like tangent. I always think about like all the things that
Mhm.
this part of the book like contradicts, or like everything that I know that like now I know wasn't true. And um
Exactly.
all the like I think about like all like the bad representation that has come for that's been that we've been ingested about Native Americans. And like to have like this really solid piece of reference material to go back to will definitely be like an extensive resource for me, I think. And I'm just really glad that I took the time to read this and to find it, because I mean it was kind of pricey, but I'm glad I found it.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh I wish it was like available more places, honestly, because I think that it's just so important.
Yeah. And there are so many places that I mean, it's kind of like how they were talking about in the introduction that like all of our theories have to incorporate everybody. Like we have to incorporate everybody's experience because like the way the like some of the main frameworks of stuff they were talking about in this book, I see it so present in our society now. Like when they were talking about how to even frame Native American women as acting outside the binary and portraying them as more masculine and savage. In order to even do that, they had to force them within the binary in the first place. So
Right.
there was like a forcing in. And then on top of that, once you're forced in, you then get othered and put on the outside. And it's like, what is the I mean, it's that kind of question, the what is the reason? And the reason is colonization. But it was I think it was really impactful for them to kind of just illustrate that specifically, that in order to be considered outside the binary and to be pretty much written out of history, you had to get forced in the binary first. And whether that be like the binary of man or woman specifically, or the binary of feminine, quote unquote feminine, and thus quote unquote able to be conquered versus masculine, savage, needing to be tamed, and the way that they would bounce between the two depending on what the situation was, who was being talked to, and whether they were trying to proselytize versus colonize versus like enslave versus take women from them. And just I think seeing that still play out here, just like in life, so many things are gendered in the
Mhm.
same way as like feminine, submissive, should be conquered, should do this, should be more willing to do this, that. Whereas masculine is, should be fought, should be not necessarily eradicated, but like conquered by force. And just I think seeing not only people shoved into those concepts, but like concepts, ideas, countries, the way we gender objects, like all type of stuff.
Right. And like how fluid it's always been, and how much of a an introduced concept the binary is, and how much of an
Mhm.
invented concept it is, and how much and how there and I think having some cultural examples of like how um people were existing before colonization is just so important. And I think it plays such a um I think it's something that's too often overlooked in the teaching of this land's history. And I think
Yes.
that um I think that that's another reason why this is really important, because it like it provides like a new starting point for like where to get information from, and to how,
Mm,
into the story of, you know, these cultures, and how they dealt with gender, as opposed to how we've been taught um our entire lives to deal with gender. And
yeah.
it just it feels so, like I said, it feels like such an accomplishment, and such a it feels like, I like you really did something when you like reading it. You're like, wow, like I just learned so much, and
Yes.
it's not
It's like you
always
got to
the
zoom out
case.
and it's just like, wow, I see it now. I see it. I see it and I put words to it. Like I think that's the part, is that it may have been visible to us before, but being able to actually have words put to it,
Yeah, and
I
to
think.
be able to put the pieces together is really important as
Mhm.
well.
Exactly, exactly. And then the what's it called? When I was reading the Europeans, the colonizers version of events that happened, it reminded me a lot about the way they teach history, like Texas history in Texas.
Hmm.
Um, because Lord have mercy. And it reminded me specifically of how we learned about the Alamo. Like if you ever, the like never forget jokes, or like remember the Alamo, those jokes. I wish I could tell you they are jokes. They would not let us forget the Alamo in elementary school. Like the way I had to go see that Alamo 3 times in 5 years, like before the age of 10, they were taking us down there to go see this place. But they
Sorry.
also had us watching like black and white war films about how like William B. Travis and like 13 other people conquered Santa Ana at the Alamo. And even as a kid, I think now that I have more language for it, looking back, I see that even as a kid, I was like, okay, I'm not sure how we got to this war, this fight, whatever, being justified. I remember as a kid and even growing up, I was always like, okay, well, how did you get to being at war with people who were already here? Like, how did that happen? And being grown now, it's like they were telling the story of, oh, well, this land was ours. We just took it from Santa Ana and then we put him in jail after we fought that war and we rightfully won this land. And it's like, no, that is not true at all.
Right.
And the education that you get, especially in Texas, the education you get about Texas history, you would never know. You would never know that people were here to start, honestly. Because like the way they make it seem in the history books that we had to read, they made it seem like Europeans and also Santa Ana got here at the same time and they were just like fighting
Hmm.
over things, or like anybody, pretty much anybody that like stood in Europeans' way, pretty much. Um, were
Right.
like people that were here that got here at the same time as the Europeans did, and they were just duking it out for the land. They never tell you that people already lived here until you start learning about Thanksgiving and stuff. But the way they portray Thanksgiving, it's like, oh well, everybody was just so happy go lucky, blah 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 blah. And I don't remember where in this book they were talking about it, and I don't think well, no, they did explicitly say it. Where one of the colonizer accounts was just talking about how they moved on to like a new tribe or something, or a new community, and everybody was super nice again, and like nicer than the first folks that they encountered. And for me, what I was hearing in that, and then what they were talking about in the description afterward, was like, if I had heard about like a community down the street just getting absolutely massacred by these new people, of course I'm gonna try and show up with like maybe a little gift or two, just because I also don't want to get massacred. Like, let's at least not start out at that point. And for the Europeans to get there and be like, oh, well, it seems like they favor us too. They must really love us here. We can't wait to conquer. How are y'all getting that message? How are
Hmm.
you making these expeditions and getting that same message every single time? Like I guess it doesn't make sense to me how you can go to land with people already on it and then be like, they just want us to conquer them so bad. We
Right.
should send the people over here. Like, how?
Not to mention all the diseases that they brought to basically like wipe the people out.
Hello? And like that's the thing right there. Like I see a lot of reactionaries and a lot of right-wing responses being like, well, if they didn't want us to take this country, they should have defended it better. And it's like, when you have bioterrorism as a weapon, what do you want people to do? What do
Right.
you want people to do for a disease they've never seen before that you brought from your own country that's killing people? What are you expecting people to do when you encounter when it's already hostile for one? That was already unexpected, but hostile and carrying all these new bioterroristic weapons. It's like I think every time I learn more and more about colonization, because I mean, obviously, there's always going to be stuff for me to learn. It feels like every time I learn more and more, it just becomes so much more incredulous to me that a group of people literally came here and were like, "Oh yeah, yeah, they're giving us gifts because they think we're gods." Like, how? How did you get to that point specifically? It just doesn't. And I think, like we were talking about with It's All About Love, I think that might just be me coming from a perspective of being a Black person. Like, that seems unfathomable to me just because of my own experiences.
Right.
And also, like, knowing whiteness the way I do now, it also still makes complete sense. It's like it makes sense because I know how white folks operate, and also like, but how? In the very how.
Right.
Mm,
And I
mm,
think
mm.
that it like this will prove to be such a resource when I'm having like discussions or I want to have discussions or I want to ask questions. Like it'll be
Mm.
so good to like have something to like refer back to be like, okay, so I've heard of that before. What it is like, so you say you're like two spirited, like, and then so I have a good understanding of what two spirit is without having to ask too many questions about that, or
Exactly.
and have a reliable source that
Yeah.
you know that is well crafted and like well organized and um so well researched
Yeah,
and
that's what I was gonna say. Well cited too. Like every bit of this comes with a citation and comes with citing other authors. It's like there's so many different points you could go, so many different books you could read just from this one alone.
right.
And I'm really grateful for that. I know sometimes it feels like I'll read a book and I'm like, okay, well, where do I go next? I have no idea where to go next. And it feels like it at least gave me a little list, if anything, of just places to start.
Right.
Because I think this book really felt like it touched on something I wasn't really sure how to articulate, where it was
Hmm.
like, where does everything fit in? It's like, you have like a general overview of something, you know that things are different than what they seem, but sometimes it gets hard to find like an actual resource or an actual account dissecting that specific part. And I feel like this book did just that, and also the resources that they provided do just that too. So it feels like I'm actually able to, dive in now and give, especially give indigenous folks the attention and the recognition of the work that I've been wanting to give, but I guess just didn't know where to start, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it was.
think that this is a great, especially like introduction into more indigenous um fields of thought and so I knew so very little about most indigenous cultures. Like I have a family that runs from indigenous people, and I don't know anything about it. I was just so far removed from it at this point that I think it was just really good to, and I don't like know too many indigenous people in like real life. So I think that it was just really helpful to have this as
Mhm.
a way to like, you know, reach topics that I don't really know like what to Google or like how
Yeah, like how
to
to even go about finding the information, because how do you phrase it? How do you phrase it to find it?
right. But
Hmm.
knowledge is just so important. And I think that
Exactly.
I'm so glad that I have a good resource for it now.
Exactly. And while I was like, because while I was thinking about this book and while I was reading this book, it made me think of the term antibinary, Antebinary, so like antebellum, that prefix, and the way it had been described to me that really resonated with me. I think it was, and I don't want to say it's like two spirit before non-indigenous folks because it's not the same, but it's generally referring to people who feel or people whose gender and whose gender identity is a conception that no longer exists with us because of colonization. So it's like it's outside of the binary, but also outside the scope of what we have words for because of colonization.
Right.
And when I thought like it made me think a lot about that because I remember I learned that term, I want to say very early on in my grad school career. But as I started, I was on TikTok doing something and I would hear people talk about the same kind of concept. And so I would comment and be like, hey, I just learned about this term anti-binary. That sounds a lot like what you're talking about. And a lot of folks will go look it up and be like, you know what? That's actually a lot of what I feel that like my gender can't be described by the words that we have now, the words that we have now that everything's been colonized. And it was so interesting being able to, I guess, like learning a term and then realizing just how much it fits into place with so many other people. And I think for me, I kind of vacillate between it here and there because it's, I mostly just say trans and non-binary, but sometimes it really does feel like that. Like the words I would use to describe my gender are just not they're not words in my own conception. There's not
Right.
really a way I can describe it. I'm just me. I'm just Sean. And like that for me, that's how it's easiest to say it. Like if I had one word to describe my gender, it's Sean. That's it. But like if I want to elaborate on it, there's not really, I feel like I kind of get stuck in my tracks because I'm like, I don't know how to tell you that none of the things that you want to describe me with work for me. Like, yes, I transition, I have top surgery, I'm on T. And I'm also still outside of the binary, as in I was never in the binary, never a part of the binary. I just exist at the same time as it. If that
Right.
if that makes sense. I know I'm just talking, child.
Yeah, but it's also I think also helpful to have something to like to have a like the vocabulary to voice, you know, what you think like what you're leaning to, or to have like things that are like prominent things that people know to like I think like with as sexuality and gender is a lot of people think of it as like an expanding thing, like these things are just being made up as we go. But I think that
Mhm.
it's important to be like, no, these things existed for
Exactly.
very
There just wasn't
long,
words for it. Yes.
right? And that the even there were even words for things that we've lost along the way that you
Hmm.
that that and so it feels like things are being discovered, but they're not being discovered. They're being named. They're being the names are being found. The words are being discovered. The words are being rediscovered, not
Yes.
discovered for the first time.
Exactly. Like it's not that the identity has never been here. It's just that the words to describe it haven't existed before.
And the freedom to describe yourself
The
had been taken
self-determination.
away, had been taken away by colonization, which I also think is important conversation to have. That like colonization also took the the also took language from us. It took the freedom to express from us, so
It
that
took
we were
description from
forced
us.
to express
Mhm.
ourselves on the terms of other cultures, the
Exactly.
colonizers' culture. And I think that that is an important ethos to that needs to also be carried on with the stories themselves, you know.
Exactly. And I think that ties into the what is it? Oh, what is it called? I think it's like the 14 tenets of white supremacy or whatever, the worship of the written word. That feels like it ties in right there because so much of what just in general, like very big picture, it feels like so much of what we deal with in the world now is just binary things, like not just a male, female, masculine, feminine binary that's been set there, but just like a binary across everything. It's either one thing or it's another thing. Like it's, and then with specifically with what we were just talking about, like you can either define yourself within the set of words that we have for you, or you don't exist. Like that, there's no one or the other. And like that, I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with like asexuality, people being non-binary, people being like demigenders, trigenders, all that stuff. If people just found out that you can be cis or trans and they still only know men and women, they have no idea that non-binary exists, that asexuality exists, and are resistant to that conversation where it gets brought up. And it's like, okay, if I'm telling you I found a word for my identity, and you're telling me, you know what, I've never heard of that, so I'm gonna ignore it. What do you mean do with that? That doesn't change that I'm that identity. It just, the only thing it changes is the fact that we will not be interacting anymore. That's it.
Right, like your denial of my existence doesn't change that I am this thing.
Yes, literally. And I think that also ties into my big hatred for like the trans question. Like, should trans people exist? It's like, why are you asking if I should exist and I'm literally already right here in front of you? Like, how are you going to ask a question about whether or not I should exist when that's already a given? There's no
Because they want to have the conversation about trans people without including trans people. They want to have a conversation about asexual people without including asexual people, because it's like once you include them in the conversation, it becomes redundant, because it's like, does it exist? Yeah, so like what now? Like they have the same conversations over and over again on things that are settled, like asexual people exist, trans people exist, two-spirit people
like
exist.
people's identities are settled. And I saw something brief, and I didn't get to see it in full, but it was basically talking about like that specific question. When you talk to people and you're like, hey, I'm trans, I already exist, they consider you, like they consider it to be arguing a false premise already. So they don't want to listen to you because you're existing in a state of false premises. And it's like, whatever you want to call that logic brain, the quote unquote logic brain that they got, it's like, what is the point of a question about a group that already exists if you're like, man, should that group really exist? Guess I'm already 26. I don't know what you want me to tell you. Like I'm already right here. I've existed for more than a quarter of a century. I've existed across 4 decades somehow, and 2 centuries, 2 millennia. I don't know what you want me to do other than stay black, queer, trans, and I like. So it does get, it gets so
Because
frustrating
they want to have, and I think it's also like this kind of like fake allyship that people have, where they want to like, they feel like they want you to explain yourself to them so that they can decide if they want to give you, so they can decide if they want to give you rights or not. And it's like, how about I just like, it's not about whether or not you accept me. I don't need you to accept me, because I'm here, I'm already existing.
Literally. Like
either get out of my way or lend help
me. Literally, like it doesn't matter if you believe in my existence or not. I already exist. I'm asking you not to harm me. That's all I'm asking.
It's not
like, well, I just want to know. Like, I just want to
ask for rights. You will give me rights. I am owed those rights. I will get what I'm owed. What actually is going to happen is what needs to go in your head is you decide where you're going to be, if you're going to be in my way, or if you're going to be out of my way, or if you're going to be helping me. And that's what being an ally is. It's not about, this like pseudo performativeness where you're trying to like, speak for,
like, I just want to understand better. Like, you don't need to know all the nuances. I know you just found out trans people existed yesterday. I don't think me telling you I'm trans and non-binary and exist outside of those terms anyway is gonna help you right now. So,
and it's also like this idea that like, because you just found out about it, trans people are now all of a sudden new, and it's like, like, or like just because you found out about HRT a couple years ago does not mean HRT started a couple years ago.
They'll be like, oh my god, the HRT craze. just because you found out about it 3 days ago does not mean
It's so
They'll be like,
annoying. Like,
today I heard about someone getting hormones. I didn't know you could do that. What does that have to do with me?
and it's
What does
like, why would you have known about it?
literally,
Like
if it's
why
not
would you have been aware of trans medication without being
that,
trans or being in the need to have
that
that
is it.
medication?
That's really the point, right? I feel like that's
Like
the
nobody's talking about it. Yeah, because not that many people are trans. So like, why would they be talking about it?
literally. And I
We can
think,
go back to not talking about it actually.
and honestly, we were in a better place when not a lot of people knew that trans people existed. Because now it's like, oh, you know we exist, and also you think that I'm a demon and that I'm not real. I don't know what you want me to tell you. Besides that, I'm about to go eat some Popeyes. Like it doesn't make any sense. It's just like why are our names in your mouth when you did not know what trans people were? Like you didn't know what transgender as a term was roughly 48 hours ago. And you've learned about it, and your first question is, well, should trans people exist? Sit down. Sit down. And
Yeah, it's
it's
like
it gets on my nerves.
we don't need to be in this space where we're constantly like debating the existence of people that are already here, or this space where we're like debating things that you don't actually have a say in, like whether or not trans kids get gender affirming care, like that literally has nothing to do with you. So like why are you
Mhm.
in this conversation at all in the first place?
Yes, and doesn't make any sense at all. Like
And
for
it's one
me,
thing
I know
like it's also
when I
like
was
this thing
first
where I
learning
can't
about
even talk to a lot more people about thing because I know like they're gonna get mad when I tell them I don't actually give a fuck about their opinions.
hello, and they'll be like, "Well, you should," and it's like, "What? Give me one reason. Are you
Like
buying me tater tots? Are you doing anything for like? I just met you off the street. What are we gonna? When I leave, you don't even know my name. Like when we leave here, we're never seeing each other again. I don't care what you
and
think
it
about me. I'm
and I
still
think
trans.
that is also like part of like the psychosis that like goes into these people is that they are vehemently convinced that their existence is the most important existence and that that
Mhm.
that we need them. They're obsessed with the idea that we need them, we need their input, and that
Yes. And that there goes white supremacy again, individualism. They're like, well, I think my opinion should matter. Then I think you should suck a fuck. But it seems like neither of those things are going to be happening today. So like it just and it's like you already shouldn't have, opinions about trans people shouldn't exist anyway. But it's like go do that on your own time. There's no need for you to be in my business asking me every single personal question, this, that, and the third. Like, if you want to learn something, I have a really, really cool contraption for you. It is called Google. She is so good at her job. Like, if you don't go
but I
listen to
think
her, and
also like so at some point some part of me feels like people weren't like meant to have all this information. Like sometimes it's better off that you just don't know. Like
yes,
you don't
oh,
need to
oh,
know the ins and
that point
outs.
specifically, that you want to
You don't need to
over
know
that
like
point.
you don't need to know
And
like what HRT is. You don't need to know like what the side effects of HRT is because you're not taking HRT. It's none of your business
literally,
actually.
it's never gonna
And
affect.
it's
And like that's why I got so upset at that. Oh my goodness, what was it? It was that I don't know if you saw it, but I think it was what news article did it go? I think it was Reuters. It was either Reuters or it was AP. But it was that trans woman that had put out the link to that DIY hormone site. They put it in the article, and I think she also, in a reply to the article once it came out, she was like, "Hey, I'm in this article. I'm talking about how I get my HRT. I'm talking about how I DIY my HRT and how I get it from like overseas sellers." And then she posted the link to the site, and on the site it literally says, "Do not just share this link with anybody. Only share this link with the people who this link needs to be shared with." And it's like it go right back to your point. Like everybody doesn't have to know everything because now that could be criminalized. That could very well be criminalized. I think in the UK they tried to make it so that if you were doing DIY hormones, you could not go in the clinic for like testing to get your levels checked and make sure that you're doing okay. They were like, if you're not getting it from us, don't check your levels here. You can't do it. And I don't know if that went into law or not, but that was something that they were trying to propose. And it's like, I know that you want to share resources with people, and that was it tied back into whiteness and individualism because it was a white trans person and people that were calling them in. She was like, "No, I'm doing this for the greater good." You're gonna get the site taken down, and you're gonna get people killed. That
That's
that's
just
what it is.
that's just the inevitability of it. Like I think that um yes, it is important for information, certain information to be available, but not like
It
the
don't have
use
to
of
be for everybody. Not
medications. Like
everybody needs to
that's
know
not
everything.
something that needs to be easily available. Like that's like there are things that need to be easily available, and there are things that need to be gate kept for
Literally,
safety.
like if you were linking a website that says don't just give this link to anybody, why would you put it in a national news article
And
and
also
then
like
link it
like
under
it
that?
violates the trust of the people that are doing the important work on that because like there is like for people's safety
Mhm.
like once like people know what certain things are, it makes it harder for people to keep their secrecy. Like um
Exactly.
makes it easier for
Like
people
it
to look for
compromises so
things
many
that
people.
inside of people that may be trying to be discreet about things, like because now there's more available information out there about not necessarily like general things like theory and stuff, but like actual
Like
things
actual
about
tangible thing.
like
Yes.
tangible things that can incriminate someone.
Yes. And like that's I think even on top of well, not even on top of that, branching off of that, I think that especially sharing that link so wide and having it just be DIY hormones in general, a lot of people don't know that testosterone is on the schedule. Like it's on the FDA's drug schedule. Not the FDA. It's on the federal drug schedule. I want to say it used to be Schedule 3, but I think they moved it up to Schedule 2. Which means that it is a felony to possess illegally. You can you're going to jail if that happens. And I don't think estrogen, it's not the case with estrogen. So that's a lot easier to DIY because like there are no restrictions for that. But testosterone, you can't give your extra testosterone to people and that be tracked because that's felony. You can't make your own testosterone because that's also a felony. You manufactured a scheduled drug in your own house. Like
And I
there's
think
so
that's also
many
something that isn't talked about enough, like these specific differences there are with certain communities, like whether it be like trans men versus
Mhm.
trans women, like that they're like there are specific differences, and they are criminalized in different ways and they are treated differently. And I think
Mhm.
it's important to like I also think it's important that we have these discussions intra communally and not
Yeah,
like
this does not need to be a mixed company. It does not need to be a
like
mixed
and that's one of the problems with Twitter in general. Like
is
everybody
because
allowed to
everybody
be privy to every
and then
kind of content. That, like,
not to mention all the prominent white trans people have half of black trans Twitter blocks because they're racist. Like it just implodes
girl,
on them.
don't even get me started on that because we don't have time for that conversation,
The
girl.
way they'll be like, "Hey, raising awareness, like fellow trans people," and then I'll literally see like this is from an account you blocked, and then a reply will be, "Hey, here's a screenshot for all the people, all the black trans people that this white trans person has blocked." Like you're giving out vital information and also have half of the most marginalized community
Child,
out here blocked. I'm like,
child. Like,
yeah, I'm like, I know we're technically all in community, and I need y'all to be so for real.
like
So for
be so for real. Like
because it's just so
so for
embarrassing.
real. Like,
And then and then there's so many other things that go into it too. Like right now, I've not really cared about changing my legal name. I really don't mind my dead name being on my insurance, all that stuff. It hasn't really been that much of a struggle. However, the only reason I'm considering doing a legal name change, getting everything changed, is quite literally because I live in Texas. More broadly, the United States, but Texas specifically, because it is so dangerous for me to be able to be clocked in general. On top of if I have my prescription on me, technically, and it goes back to like I think we've talked about this in this book club before about how there are so many laws that just don't get enforced unless somebody wants to enforce them. Like
Mhm.
with speeding. Technically, if you're a mile over, you could get pulled over. But me going a mile over, I'm gonna get pulled over before the 18-wheeler going 20 over is gonna get pulled over because it's easy work for him. But in the same vein, if you are traveling slash out of your house and you have prescription meds on you and you don't have the bottle indicating that your name, like indicating that it's yours, technically they can detain you for that. Like they can put you in jail for that. And so whenever I travel with my tea, I always have like my, my whole box with all my label and all my, my pharmaceutical label and everything on it.
Mhm.
And as of right now, that label matches my driver's license. That's what matters to me specifically. They always ask me, they're like, do you want me to put Sean on your labels? And I'm like, no, because if I ever get pulled over and I've got my meds on me and they check my pill bottle and it says Sean, and they check my driver's license and my federal documents and it says a different name, I'm getting brutalized. Like that's something that I have to like take steps to prevent
Especially you as a especially you as a
as a
black man.
black as a
Like
black trans person.
they're
And
just
like
waiting for an
being a
excuse
sundown
to like
state.
and the way this the state you're in, the place you're in, the thing. I
Mhm.
mean that would be there will be like oh, it's just so dangerous. Like, and I don't think
Literally,
people
like I
realize how
have to
dangerous
be
it
on
is.
my
Like,
A game. And that's the other part of it is like when I left, when I came back from, well, yeah, I guess came back. When I came back to Texas from Georgia, first of all, driving across all those southern states, I was like, woo, nice. All right. But then on top of that, it's like I remember the fear that I felt every single time I passed like a cop car that was doing a speed trap or whatever, because I had all my prescription labels. They matched everything I had. And the last two things on my mind were that one, I have all of my documentation and everything right, and an officer could simply just choose not to believe because he doesn't want to, for one. For two, yes, I've got my T vials and everything. I've got everything, stored correctly. Everything identifies correctly. But what I also had in my car was my syringes and my needles to administer that testosterone. And if a cop wanted to, in the same way as before, they could be like, well, I know you got tea in here, but I also just see some needles and syringes. You probably are using something illicit. I'm going to detain you and just check out what's going on. Like, it's so dangerous to travel with any of my meds in general at this point because you pull me over, we already have to go over the fact that I'm trans. I got lucky enough that I had to get a driver's license photo taken recently. So even though my name does read as like a more quote unquote feminine name, my driver's license photo and how I look right now pretty much look the same. Grateful for that. And that doesn't mean shit in a racist country with racist cops. It just doesn't.
it doesn't.
I
Like
could
it's
have
just
all my ducks in a row and it can still go wrong. So
yeah, it's
it's frustrating. It's frustrating. And then on top of that, even like the T vials in general, they're technically single use vials. And it's like you're giving me a millimeter of something that I'm supposed to take 0.2 milliliters of a week. That should hold 5 doses in there. But you've given me a single dose vial because none of y'all seem to understand how this works. And it's not even the pharmacist's fault. That's like just how they make them. They make them in single use vials. And it's like,
oh definitely like they always be changing packaging on stuff, and you like, child, I just learned the last packaging. Y'all changing the packaging again?
literally.
Like they just like they changed the
Mhm.
packaging on Truvada. They changed not Truvada. What do I have? Discovery. They changed the packaging on Discovery, so now it comes in like a 30. Like it comes in like it comes in like
Like a
packs instead of like a bottle, and I'm like, okay, like I mean, on one hand, I like it because it like it's good. It's easy for me to keep track of how many I've had as opposed to like putting at the bottle. I'm like, child, I hope did I have one today? Like, 'cause child, I be
listen,
forgetting.
sometimes you open that bottle and you're just like,
I can't
let's
imagine like
hope.
I
Let's
mean I feel
hope
like
and
I would
pray.
remember taking a shot but like you can't like guesstimate how much is left. Like how many have I got out of this one bottle already? Like and
Mm-hmm.
then that
Especially if you like
like
forget how long you've been using it to. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
then
and
you have some people that's like, okay, I gotta kind of make this stretch because
yes, and like
I'm not
that
gonna be
when
able to
I
go to
tell
the
you,
pharmacy. I'm not gonna.
yes,
I
because I
misestimated, or like I don't know if I'll be able to get this soon. Like I gotta
exactly.
stockpile. Like
Oh my God, you hit the nail on the head. Because when I tell you, I had my last appointment for to get my like my last well, yeah, my last 3 month supply was in March. And we had set another date for June just to make sure everything was going well. When I tell you I left the clinic and me and my clinician were both like, let's hope that gender affirming care is still legal in June for me to be able to get this prescription. Tell me why. I finally get to fill this prescription. I go to the pharmacy. Well, I'm trying to fill it at this pharmacy, and my insurance is like, well, we need a PA for that. I'm like, I just filled it in March under the same insurance. I don't know what you're talking about. So my doctor submits a PA and they decline my PA. Don't really give me a reason other than they needed more description. And I'm like, I don't know what else to tell you, but I'm trans. But with these discriminate, like with the literally with the Supreme Court case, like I think what had been so frustrating to me was that I was literally trying to get this last like 3 month supply before everything, like before the Supreme Court released anything for the year, before any of that had happened. And it feels partially like because I wasn't able to get it before that happened, I had all these other barriers. So I ended up having to pay for it out of pocket because I'm a month behind already. Like I missed a whole month because I've been waiting
oh
for them
no,
week after week after week to get this approved. And I've been off it for longer before. I just it's not ideal. Um, but it was so frustrating because it's like that's thing I'm probably gonna have to struggle with now. That's why I don't feel it at Walgreens anymore because Walgreens has already defended their employee who refused to fill someone's birth control on religious grounds. So I'm not trying to see what they're gonna do to gender affirming care. That's not I'm not interested in seeing that far. Um, but at the same time, I live in Texas. So it probably
right?
wouldn't matter. Like if someone wanted to discriminate against me in that manner, it wouldn't really matter what pharmacy they're at for one. And for two, it's not like Greg Abbott's going to do anything about it because three, he hates trans people.
And it's
And
like
so
also like we live in a like people act like certain people act like um certain laws like aren't as effective as they are, that they won't be bent and used in certain ways. Like people act like, oh well, this court case only affects you in this really certain slim situation. That's like, actually no, it doesn't. Like it you
exactly.
like
I'm like, y'all don't
when you live in these bodies, when you live in this reality, you know how certain things are stressed. And it also doesn't matter if the Supreme Court did or did not, because who's gonna get hurt in the meantime while we figure out what the specific
exactly.
legality of certain laws are that are going to get passed. And just like right now, all this trans legislation that's getting passed is blocking gender affirming care, and like
Yeah, it's getting blocked for minors
these
down here.
people who are playing around, like literally playing with like people's bodies, like they are online having these debates about like about life-saving medication
Literally.
that is essential to people's existence.
Child, and when that representative, I forgot what state it was, but that state representative, the way the automatic feeder scared me. But that state representative that was like, yeah, I have a trans daughter, and I thought she was going to take her life, if I didn't like give her gender affirming care. And so I did not give her gender affirming care. And I was like, how did you say all these things and then come to that conclusion? How did you get there? And it's like it doesn't, and they're cutting off
You're
gender
like, I'd
affirming
rather
care
her be
for
dead.
minors
Like
in
what?
September here. So I'm trying to volunteer to make sure that the youth can get what they need before then. There's a good chance it might be expanded to everyone because it's Texas. Um, and it's just so I think I think sometimes people, not even sometimes, I think people don't necessarily understand the impact of things like this on marginalized communities, even if they're part of marginalized community. Like it's the same thing with like Florida stuff, where something that targeted queer and trans people has now started affecting like D9 or whatever. And they're like, oh my God, I never thought it would happen to me. I don't know what you want me to tell you. y'all were talking about, oh, well, it's just gonna happen to the queer and trans people. We didn't expect it to happen to us. Did y'all not forget that under white supremacy, blackness is just as queer as transness?
Yeah, and then we're in this space where we just it's like, well, what's the purpose? Like where do we go from here? You know?
Literally. If and the way things are fractured, like I have never seen so much intra-community fighting on so many different levels. And it's like we got to come together for something. There's a lot of people still out here fighting for the same common cause, but it's like what we were talking about a little bit earlier. Like you have half of Black trans Twitter blocked, and yet you're out here sharing information that every trans person needs to see, and you want to talk about community. Like that's not; those two things aren't matching up.
Well, I
Or
guess it's for them because they never really considered us part of the community anyway.
literally, or when like the people that are like LGB without the T. I'm like, bro, that's not how it works. Where do you think they're gonna go after they come for trans people? Did you think they were gonna leave the LGB alone? Did you not just hear what he just said on his little microphone just now? You missed the part where they said they're against LGBTQ people. They didn't say we're against trans people. They said we're against trans people and also the rest of the LGBT community. That it blows my mind. It blows my mind when people are like, yes, I will sacrifice this part of the community so that I'm safe. And then they'll be like, well, wait, why don't you guys help me? I'm being sacrificed. What do you want me to do? We live in a country with prescriptive rights and you voted to have mine taken away. I don't know what you want me to do for you.
Mind you, there are certain people in the community that are voting against their own rights too. So it's
It's so
like
wild.
how, this is why my people will never be free, child. Cause y'all over here.
Literally. They're like, yes, I understand that I'm trans and so I'm not really this, that, or the other. Shut up. Log off. Have you ever played Blazer Tag? Maybe you should go do that instead of coming on the internet and running your mouth in the most ridiculous way. Because now all of us have to deal with this.
Right, like you done made it everybody problem now.
Literally. Like, because you
Cause
decided to be,
you
yes.
don't know what to do from today to tomorrow.
It's so wild. And it's like, you want to know, and I'm gonna only bring her up once, Miss Kelly Cavigan, because why was it like day 20 of being a Republican or day 20 of being on the right, and I don't really like non-binary people, and then it was like day 23 on the right, they don't want to use the right pronouns for me. I'm like, wow, wow, you're telling me that conservative and far right Republicans do not want to recognize you as a woman because you're trans? Who could have seen that coming? Wow.
Who? And now
And
look at you,
she's like, I don't get why
bald
you guys
headed,
are upset at me. I
confused.
got the surgeries. Do you remember? Did you see at one point she said that you should be able, as a trans woman, you should only be able to use the women's restroom after you've been on hormones and had every single surgery. You had to have every single gender affirming surgery, and you had to be on hormones for 2 years with documentation that you had to carry with you all the time, and you had to present it at the establishment to be able to go use the women's bathroom. And I was like, it sounds like something else that already happened in America. What you
And
think
then
about
they
that?
don't even make sense because it's like, girl, who gonna check me?
Literally. And now she's like, oh my God, like they don't want to let me use the bathroom. And I even got all my surgeries. Yeah, girl, you threw everybody else in the trash can. And then they said you next. Like what part about everything that's already happened don't you get? And when, oh my God, her apology low key took me out because she was like, wow, I just wanted to hang out with the normal kids and the kids that would, like, I've always been drawn to people that bully me and make fun of me. Girl, that's not my problem for one. And she was like, yeah, now that I see what's happened, I'd like to apologize to Black people for talking about slavery when I shouldn't have. I was like, I appreciate that apology, but I don't know how it fit into this part right here. But then she said, I also apologize to the non-binary community. I still don't get it, and I don't understand why y'all are a thing, but I'm willing to listen now.
Girl,
And then white trans
go ahead,
people
throw
and
her away.
white cis and trans people alike, queer and straight alike, in that woman's comments talk about, we forgive you, you're all good, give you a second chance. This apology is so genuine. And all the black and brown people were like, and so people were making videos, they're like, yeah, no, this is not a genuine apology. When I tell you white people were in the mentions talking about, yeah. A couple days later, Kelly posts on Twitter, that apology was bullshit.
And now look. And
And
now
that
look.
literally those same white
And
people were
now
like,
look.
oh my God, like I trusted her, I believed her, I can't believe she lied to me.
How about you trust the people who are actually in community with you? Supposedly.
Like, why are y'all embarrassing me? It's not even got nothing to
Because
do with me.
they want
But
to
y'all
be they want
embarrassing
to be
me.
the good, they want to be the good ones so bad. They want to be the good ones
And it's
so
like,
bad.
literally, and it's like, where has being the good, where has being the good oppressed person to an oppressor ever got anybody?
And
Ever.
it's also like this thing with like, you know, these like detransitioners, which, you know, God bless them, girl. But like, because I feel for them, but at the same time, it's like I feel for them the same way I feel for people who were delivered from being gay. Like it's like you're a tool for the oppressor, and I feel that you're
Mhm.
struggling with this, and I hope that it's resolved anyway. But that doesn't mean you become a tool for the oppressor. That is, it doesn't mean that way. Like,
Exactly.
and once you become a tool for the oppressor, you are now an enemy, and I have to treat you like an enemy because you are on the side of the enemy, and I
Literally,
can't
like
like
I don't know what you want me to
if I come across the transitioner in the street, you know I fully extend everything that they might need to them, and whether or not, you know, it may be a situation where, you know, they might not have even, some people detransition
out
out of
of safety.
safety,
Yeah,
some people
exactly.
detransition because, you know, it just
Mhm.
wasn't for them,
It's the people
and
whose
that they just
narratives get
their
used
gender
and then they go
expression has
along with it.
evolved. But you, those the people that are actually in that space, you don't see them capping for the oppressor. Like you don't see that. Like a Carrie
Exactly.
Davenport
It's so wild. Like,
a
why are
Carrie
y'all
Davenport, a drag queen, is a detransitioner. You don't see her out here being the head detransitioner on the front lines of the Republican
literally?
National Convention,
It,
girl.
child, when I tell you, it was like that one person. It was Twitter's main character of the day for like 3 weeks straight. It was a detransitioner that was talking about like beard growth and hair loss. And they were like, nobody told me that that happens on testosterone. And I was like, baby, I don't know what to tell you on that one. But then
But
later
also,
on,
like, girl, what do you have you seen a
no,
man?
but that's the thing is that later on it came out that they already had beard growth and were losing hair because of PCOS before they even started getting on T. And so it was like, hello? Like, what does this have to do with you transitioning at all? If you were complaining about these same things before you transition, and then like the whole thing ended up basically being
And
that
don't most trans men have to use, like, they have to take other medication to get their
yes,
beards to
like
even grow and
the
stuff. So
way
like,
the way it looks like I've got baby hairs going on over here because it's just receded. It's not baby hairs, it's uncle hairs. That's what it is. But but it was so wild because at the end of the day, they came back and they were like, "Well, I transitioned because I thought I was a really ugly girl, so I figured I'd try the other side and I didn't like it."
since when does that make you trans? I'm sorry, like,
And I'm literally,
we
I'm
have
sitting
to,
here like, what
like,
does
at
that
some
have to do
point with
with
the,
us?
like, with detransitioners, and I love them, you know, my heart goes out. I want to say that my heart goes out to anybody that is struggling, because obviously these
Mhm.
people are
And
struggling.
it's like if you know,
And
I respect you. I respect that you want to
you know,
detransition.
I
Why are
feel
you
so
making
bad because,
yourself a case study
like
to
I
take away
said,
everybody else's rights?
like, yeah, like as I said, like, you know, people who are suffering through things, you know, and have mental, and are, you know, in mental strife, or an emotional strife, you know, I and I send them, you know, every sense of peace that I can. And you know, as an abolitionist, I don't necessarily need there to be any ramification for these people, but
Yeah.
I think that when we're talking about like the safety of my community, and I have to put my people first. Like I have to, and
And if you're
I don't want to
weaponizing
talk crass
yourself
crazy to
versus the
you, but when
cause,
you're online speaking nonsense, acting like it is so easy to get this stuff out here, when people are literally out here fighting for the right
literally,
to get their like next dose, like it just doesn't click.
literally, they're like
It
gender
doesn't click
affirming
up.
care
Like
should not be easily accessible. I had to pay $11,000 out of pocket so that I could get a literally so that I could get my top surgery because everywhere else that would my insurance at the time would take had a 6 month waiting list. If it didn't have a 6 month waiting list, they wanted like all this documentation from therapists, from psychiatrists. Like there's already so many boundaries. And they're like, when they're like, yeah, they didn't tell me that I would grow a beard. If that's the case, then maybe that clinician specifically needs to be addressed.
and
But it's
also
like
like baby shave. Like I don't know like
there are so
what do
many.
you want me to
Oh,
do about
it's
that? That you got a beard,
so
baby. Like
funny.
I'm so sorry. Like go see a dermatologist.
Go see somebody. And then
Like
like the same, it's the same thing with Kelly Cadigan because she was like, yes, I transitioned at 15 and it went great for me. But I don't think minors should transition because what if it doesn't go great for somebody else? What are you talking about?
that's for them to go through. Like sometimes things don't work out, baby. Like that's
Literally,
and if
it's
we
like
look at the
why would you?
statistics,
Oh God!
and if
And
we
then,
look
like
at statistics, like it just doesn't happen as often as people like to think that it does. Like
it
it's
really
not
doesn't. And oh my God! And they're like,
like
if we can protect the safety of one person, it's worth it. And it's like that's
no,
how
it's
I know
not.
that
I'm
we've
sorry, it's not.
fundamentally
Like I'm sorry,
each other.
it's not worth it. Like
And that's how I know we don't see each other on an equal playing field because you saying that you want to keep one person safe and deny all these other people care is you saying that you consider trans people to be dangerous. Like you're inherently already, and that goes back to that binary part because we're outside of your conception. We are now needing to be revised, whatever that may look like. What it's looking like is violence, but they want to revise us out of history and out of existence. And it goes back to like, I think this actually ties really well into what they were talking about in the Asegi stories, where it's like people assume that because there's no documentation of certain
mhm.
things until a certain point in time, that it didn't happen until then. And it's like, no, people either left that documentation out or there was no need to point it out because society didn't work like that. Like if you've got folks who, no matter their gender, they either go to war or they are gatherers or they're hunt, whatever it is. If you are just assigned a role in your community and it's not associated with gender, why would you feel the need to mention the gender association? If that's just the way your community already works, why would you point out something that's already obvious? But then you've got colonizers coming in talking about, oh, well, I see women going to war. That doesn't make any sense. They need to be colonized. Huh? And you
These
saw that narrative of
savages. Like, huh?
that is actually exactly how this happened. What do you mean that's exactly how this happened? Or they'll be like, this is just so out of the ordinary. Have you considered that they might not be the gender that you think they are? Have you considered that gender may exist outside of the terms man and woman that you've created for these folks? Like, have we considered anything else, or do I need to smack y'all? It's just so it's frustrating to feel like, well, I guess it doesn't feel like necessarily that we're moving backwards so much as like I feel like people are saying like, wow, all of this is happening and I don't know why. Like I don't know why all these rights are getting rolled back, blah, blah, blah. I mean, like the US low key kind of has an 8 year cycle. It has like a two-term cycle, a two-term presidential cycle to get
Yeah.
off about things. Gay rights were federally recognized in 2015 in the middle of the second term of our first black president. Like, if anything, we should have seen a lot of this coming. And a lot of people did see a lot of this coming.
And
But
let's
the
not
back,
forget that like even getting to that point was like
it was bad. It was bad. Like when I tell you people were on Haley Kiyoko's ass, because 2 days, and it was a coincidence. It was a coincidence, bless her heart. But 2 days before gay marriage was federally recognized, she released the Girls Like Girls music video. What I tell you. And people were like, "Oh, Haley Kiyoko needs to like burn in hell because of her gay marriage was federally recognized." That girl alone. Leave her alone. She just gave us the best music video of all time. Leave her alone. But it's been so wild to see people being like, "Oh my God, how did we get here?" What you mean? Like,
I
what do you?
think
What
it's
do you?
like it's also
Like
like
you're
people
you're talking
I
about
think
the
in
same? Oh,
2020 a lot
that's
of people woke up to the reality
it's
that we live in this country for the first time. And then so like they're like they think that we just arrived here and it's not there's not a clear progression that you can check on to see how we got from point A to point B, and there literally is. And it's
that's
because
fair.
like people just started paying attention. We didn't just get here. You just started paying attention. You weren't paying attention the whole time. And this is why it saddens me that more people aren't awake that more people weren't awake to the oppression, and more people weren't um cognizant of the the
The long
disparity in opportunity for different queer communities. Like people were like, oh well, the queers aren't fighting like the queers of the yesteryear. Like maybe where you're at, maybe where you're sitting at right now, there aren't, but like where we are in the South and where our rights have always been under constant danger, this is not new to us. Like
literally, like
when
it.
I literally live in North Carolina, and the bathroom
Mhm.
bills were literally like my entirety of my high school career, like that literally was the thing. Like that is literally like what
Like we grew up literally. Don't Say Gay was just repealed
girl,
like 10 years ago, maybe.
if that, probably not even.
And the Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Like I I will still never understand to this day when the US was like trans people can be in the military again, and trans people were like, yeah, huh? What do you mean, yeah? Y'all did not see what happened to the Tuskegee Airmen. Y'all didn't see anything about anything with any other community. You just went like, yeah, I can go to war for my country. This country don't even like you. The
Child.
president who keeps running on giving us rights won't even give
The
us
only thing,
rights.
the only thing that I think is like a thing about that is it does help people that are in
That
the
need to
military already, that need
Mhm.
to take that next step, which I think is important. Um, like
Exactly.
people
And
that
then
are stuck in these
again,
situations and need a way to get to the next thing, and bills like that really do have an effect on those people. Just
exactly.
like something that hasn't been changed, where it's like it used to be that like people could join the military and then like get their citizenship through the military like
Mhm.
expedited, but now you have to be a citizen basically before you get in the military because you have to go through a background check, and non-citizens
Mhm.
can't pass a background check. So uh it has to be like this thing where like people have to be a citizen before they join the military, and that's honestly one of the reasons, so honestly one of the biggest reasons why um military they say that like military enrollment is down, is because they can't do that thing that they used
Yeah.
to do. So,
And I mean, also because now a lot of people are disabled because they let COVID run rampant.
yeah, that's true as well,
Like, damn,
and that's
like
something that a lot of people aren't
you
talking
want to
about.
force to do X, Y, Z, and then you decimated your whole force. You want to know what's funny is because I feel like they would try and draft me, and I'd be like, mm-mm-mm. Under y'all sexist laws, and according to the F on my driver's license, I will not be getting drafted. Like, oops. But also, y'all can't draft me because if I get off my meds for too long, y'all not gonna like me on that battlefield. For one. For two, I'm deaf in one ear. You want to give me a command to move because there's a bomb and you're on my right side? Guess who's getting blown up? That would be me. Like,
I mean,
And
most people
and I
can't.
also can't
Most
see
people
with my
can.
glasses off. Like it. Oh,
A lot of people can't pass a military physical, which is also another thing that our country
exactly.
is. Our country
Our
is
country
falling
is
to the
literally
bone.
like
Like people
military.
are malnourished. People are, they they just aren't up to snuff. Like
Literally, like
we need
we're
so
suffering the
much
effects of
comprehensive
disease.
reform on healthcare and things like that. That it's just
Yes. Oh my God. And people are like, oh my God, like this country, blah, blah, blah. It's like I feel like people that are mourning that specific part, like, oh man, like nobody's really eligible for the military anymore. I have about the same amount of sympathy as I have for white people that are like, well, white people were the ones that ended slavery, right? And who started it? Just a quick, who started it?
let's talk about that.
It really doesn't matter who
Huh?
ended it. Who
Let's talk
started
about that.
it? They'll be like Britain will be like, well, yeah, we ended slavery way before America did. And how it got there. Let's think critically and let's think over time because y'all looking real bad right now. But it is so wild. I think honestly every day that something new happens in this country, I get blatantly reminded that this is a country with prescriptive rights. And it's like, how do you make a country with prescriptive rights in the first place? How do you
Literally.
not just have a country where everybody has human rights? Why do I have to have human rights under an amendment to the Constitution
Because
of
this
this?
country was not established with the intention of that being the case. No matter how often they try to act like it was.
And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that people are like, well, like we should follow the Constitution. That's I think the thing for me is like y'all not touching a
People
document
don't
from
realize how many people can only
1776.
vote. People don't realize how many people only have rights because of amendments to the original Constitution.
Literally. And it is so wild. It's just like the way we've existed, the way this country has existed for so long with the ability to just like deny rights to people. Like, excuse me, and that's what I was gonna say earlier. Like, I know a lot of people are very apathetic towards voting, and with good reason right now, especially voting for Democrats, because you literally held abortion rights hostage for 48 years and then they got struck down when that's usually the thing that you hold over people for elections. What are you going to hold over people for elections now? Like that's gone. Voting rights are damn near gone. You didn't follow up on any of your promises. Like from a
Your
very big
affirmative action is gone.
literally like if you were just an American who quite literally had really followed what's going on at all, like in details of politics, what you've seen in the last what 3 4 years is that the Democrat everybody wanted to win. The Democrat everybody wanted to win took office. We lost a bunch of civil rights. He did not pay the payments that he promised. The man literally was like, "I'm going to give you $2,000 in payments in COVID payments," and then he was like,
Girl,
"Well,
you bumped that. These
six
student
hundred plus."
loans. Hello.
The way he was like,
The
well, if you
promise to
pay
get rid of these
here's
student loans.
fifteen
Hello.
hundred plus, like 600 plus 1,400 is 2,000. Joseph R. Biden, I know what you said. You said $2,000 payments. You didn't say a combined amount of 2,000. If you had said a
Like,
combined
don't
amount
play
of
with me.
2,000, do you think I would be on your ass right now? And then you don't want to cancel student loan. You're like, well, my hands are tied. You were the president of the United States. Do something. Do anything. Do your job. How about that? Do your job. And at the same time as I say do your job, capitalism is alive and well in this country. The president, with all the perks and payments that he makes, with his actual salary and with the perks, that man averages like maybe 500,000 a year. Maybe. So it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to me, but if I think about it from a capitalism standpoint, it makes sense that someone with a net worth of $100 billion and others in that caliber, somebody that makes what the president of the United States makes in like a second of our actual time, it makes sense that the president can be bought by someone who makes a billion, trillion, quadrillion times his salary. And it's like it shouldn't work that way. It never should have worked that way. Politicians
Right.
should never be swayed by money. And we also are in a society that doesn't let people be billionaires. So it's like I don't want to place the blame on anyone. What I'm saying is that this economy has fostered this type of governance. If we wanted a different type of governance, we needed to have curbed this so long ago. So long ago.
Right.
Ooh, it's just frustrating. It's frustrating. It puts us back into binaries again. Cause you either do the will of the government or you're a traitor. That's it. Those are the only two options you got. Never
Right.
mind if you exist in a space, in a third space, outside, like the government literally doesn't want you to exist, and yet you exist anyway. Because now, even if you just live a completely neutral life, because you exist outside of the government wanting you to, you're on the traitor side anyway. It don't make no sense.
Yeah.
And that's why
Well,
I drink my little electrolytes and mind my business and donate to
child, at this
no.
point, essential.
Mm-mm-mm.
And it's hard though, because so much is going on that it makes it hard to even know like what is like you can't. It's always so hard to. I wish I could go back to sleep. Like I wish I wasn't woke. Like I wish I could live blissfully in ignorance, like some people do. But
Literally, like the
it's not the
way,
case.
oh my goodness. Because it's stuff that I have to I remember we talked a while back, and I've talked about it in other spaces before, how like I get so exhausted having to check if the laws have changed in Texas before I leave my house. So now I literally just don't go to the bathroom at public restrooms anymore, because today might be the day that I forgot to check and see if a law against me going to the men's bathroom was passed. And if there is, and I go to the men's bathroom and someone decides to clock me, boom, I'm in jail. And it's like, I can't, me personally, I don't have the bandwidth to keep checking every day. So I only go to the bathroom at home or somewhere where I'm like 100% positive people perceive me as a man. The reason that doesn't happen often is because I forget people perceive me as a man. If I'm not looking directly at myself in the mirror or in a camera, I completely forget that people perceive me as a man, because I don't perceive myself that way at all. I just perceive myself as a person who transitioned into the body that I wanted as a kid. The body that I
Mhm.
wanted as a kid was a body with a deep voice, a body with a flat chest, a body with facial hair. That's about it. I've gotten all those things. I've gotten everything I wanted from my transition. And because of that, people think that I'm a man. And for the life of me, I always forget that people think I'm a man. Like it literally never crosses my mind unless I'm looking at myself. And that's been the hardest part of all of this. Is like I'm navigating according to the laws, being in
Mhm.
Texas, being black, being queer, on top of that being trans, and on top of that being perceived as a black man, when I myself never think of myself as a black man. It gets so, I guess, not wobbly so much as like it is so much harder for me to be on my guard when I forget that I look like a man. Literally.
And it also like, especially living in the South, living in, I mean, but just being in this country in general, like that doesn't that just exposes you to a whole different
Mm-hmm.
set of like vulnerabilities that like
Exactly. It's
because
a bunch of known
as
unknowns.
a black man moving through the country, as a black man existing outside of the house,
Literally.
like it's not like you're any safer. So it's like so you still
Exactly.
gotta
And
check
that,
the
like
laws
that's the
because you
thing. Like
because
I
you
have to
next
be
thing you
aware.
know.
I have to be aware of that, like that space I take up as a perceived black man. Like that was really hard for me in Atlanta, because cops are everywhere in Atlanta, even before the Cop City stuff. Cops were everywhere in Atlanta before that. And like the way I move and the way I carry myself, I'm kind of loud in everything I do. Like not necessarily audibly loud, but like I'm a very boisterous person when I move around and stuff. And when I remember that I'm perceived as a black man, I have to change the way I walk sometimes, because I don't want to be seen as intimidating. I don't want to be seen as this or that. I don't want to be seen as a way that can put me in a compromising position. And also, I don't do it that often because I forget forget that I look like a black man, or I forget that people perceive me that way. So it's so much harder to walk along those lines. Like I've talked about it here too. Like the way I compliment people, the way I approach people has had to change with the way that I look now. And on top of that, I can clock very well when I've forgotten what people perceive me as. When I go to give somebody a compliment or something, and they look at me a certain way, I'm like, oh shit, I forgot I look like a man, and I forgot that, like, due to misogyny and sexism, et cetera, this is no longer perceived in the way it used to be perceived when I used to do. Like, as a black woman, I literally would be yelling across the street to other black women, "Come on, red dress, you got it!" Like that is something that just came to me so naturally because if you look great, if your dress looks great, if your heels look great, your eyebrows look great, I'm gonna tell you because you
Mhm.
deserve to know. No one's uplifting black women enough, so you deserve to know. But now, as someone perceived as a man, if I'm yelling across the street at a woman, I'm like, "Hey, red dress," that is not the same at all. And
Also,
it's
the
not
inherent danger in interacting with men as a man versus interacting with men as someone who's perceived as a woman.
terrible. We had somebody in to fix the floors down here. When I tell you he was trying to relate on some man to man shit, and I was like, sir, I don't know what the hell you're talking. He was like talking about, oh, like I just found out that I pay for everything for my girlfriend, and I found out that she was being like a whore at the club, and I just don't know why. And I was like, it sounds like you guys maybe wanted different things in this relationship, and she just wasn't upfront with you, maybe. So maybe you should find someone different. And he's like, well, I just don't understand why bitches be whores and stuff. And I was like, it sounds like maybe you guys just did not want the same thing in the relationship, huh? And he was like, well, yeah, like I wanted her to be faithful to me. I didn't want her to be a slut. And I was like, okay, so what I'm hearing, it's like I can't do it. I'm not gonna sit here and play this game with you because I don't know how to play that game. I don't know what the hell is going on. And I'm not gonna sit here and be like, yeah, fuck whores.
That's so crazy. But I
It
think
is
I think I relate to that as like a gay man. It's like you like moving through like uh, I am so not up to that thing where like you pretend like you're like with something that I'm just not with. Like I'm not
can't
at
do
a
it.
certain
One
point
thing
in my
about my
life
thing,
where I fight back against everything. I'm like so like something like that would happen where somebody would be complaining about girls. I'd be like, well, look, how what did you do to put yourself in this situation?
like
Because
without you beating my ass, I would like to share something with you. It's wild, and that's also a wild part is that I never know how I'm gonna be perceived. I still get people that call me she on the phone, like to this day when I'm at my job. They'll be like, "What can I do for you, ma'am?" So I'm like, honestly, I'm here to check on this, and this because I've stopped caring. For me, as a point of safety, I've had to stop caring because I've had a family member call me and tell me that they'll never see me as anything but a woman on the same day that a neighbor threatened to shoot me because he thought that I was a gay black. Like it, I'm like, you cannot be further from. And then at my previous job, they would let me change my name on like the thing that everybody sees. And so one day, I somebody said something to me one day, and I was like, you know what? Because my dead name is on here and I present like this, they might be thinking that I'm a trans woman who just hasn't transitioned yet medically. And so it's like I truly never know.
like a whole other level of
Yes, it's like I never know how I'm gonna be perceived. So it's like I don't want to waste the energy being like, I bet I'm perceived as a man in this space, blah blah blah, because I never know how I'm gonna be perceived. And I've had experiences that run the gamut. When I tell you, I've had straight cis men be like, yeah, I don't really fuck with you like that because like you seem a little fruity because you listen to like I was listening to like Rico Nasty. They're like, yeah, because you listen to Rico, like you listen to women's music. If that's what it takes to keep you away, me just playing the music that I enjoy, you can stay away. You can absolutely
congratulations.
stay over there. Because one thing about me, Rico, Flo Millie, Maya the Don, like they're all on the roster. I don't know what you want me to. I don't know what you want me to tell. And they're like, yeah, like I don't mess with that gay shit. So stop talking and walk away. I don't care. Why would I care that you don't like gay people? Leave me alone.
Like
I don't
literally,
like
like
either.
my like literally leave me alone.
Like I don't like you either. How about that? And they'll be like, well, I don't like that. And I don't like chocolate cake. I'm glad we're stating facts. Like, oh, they be getting on my nerves so bad. But yeah, it's that was really hard because it was like when I was in the middle-ish of transition, well, the middle being, I guess, when I wasn't able to pass. And I don't consider passing to be a privilege, mostly because I have no idea what the fuck is going on, honestly. Sometimes I pass, sometimes I don't. But it's not really a passing for me because I'm not a man anyway. But before, like when I still looked kind of cis woman-ish, quote um, I would have people follow me out of spaces, like out of the men's bathroom, talk about, well, you shouldn't be in there. You shouldn't be in there. Like, what's going on? You sure you're a guy? Blah, 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 blah. Then I start wearing a Packer and I start getting harassed because when I tell you I had some lady and she was opening the door. She told her son to open the door for me. She was like, open the door for this lady right here. And I go and grab the door from him. She turns around, looks at my face, looks down at my packer and goes, oh, I meant sir. Leave me alone. I'm picking up some food. We don't need to be having a conversation. You don't need to be looking at me like that. Nobody needs to be looking at me like that. I'm wearing this so that people don't beat me up in the bathroom while I'm at work. Shut up. But it actually ruined my experience with Packers. They felt gender affirming for a while, but I stopped wearing them because I had to wear them for survival purposes for so long that I don't associate it with affirmation or positivity.
oh wow.
I was Yeah, it was something, and it's not that I don't feel complete without it. It was something that I kind of did occasionally, but it would perk me up when I did do it. And now it's just like it's not even anything that I think about too much anymore. And I really sat down with that a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, okay, well, why don't I pack anymore? And I was like, well, last time you packed it was to make sure that you stayed safe. So it would make sense that you don't want to do a survival tactic as a basic gender affirming care mechanism. And in much
Hmm.
the same way that like me getting my name changed, I really don't mind being socially Sean and legally my dead name. That has not bothered me at all. But to have to change it for survival purposes because I live in Texas,
Right.
that's not really gender affirming for me. That's just survival.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think tying back to the Asegi stories, it really feels like there's so many different third spaces out there. And I think it feels like there's so many, and at the same time, it's all the same third space. And I think that, like just like the author was talking about, with interpreting it through this kind of lens, it opens everything else to be interpreted the same way. And I'm grateful for that. I hope that people can read between the lines. But I feel like, especially like with the passages from this book right here, it feels like there were no lines to read between, because really, how do you look at a colonizer narrative and be like, this is exactly what happened? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't. Maybe I'm just built different, and I am, but it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. But those are my thoughts.
Yeah. I think this is a good place to end the recording, so I'll go ahead and do that. Um, these both these books were really came at really vital points, I think, for me. So I'm really glad that I read them, and I'm excited to see what we read next.
Yes. I'm so I